Good morning, oh boy, we're stumbling out of the block. Good morning, everybody. Wednesday, November 15th. You can hear the voice, you can see the nostrils, you can see the eyes. It's a struggle to be here this morning, but we're here for NFL Week 11 full preview. We'll talk about every game in this video, all of the sides, all of the totals, all the money lines, some prop angles as well. If you're new to the channel, subscribe button is down below. If you're coming back for another video, the thumbs up is right below as well. We appreciate it if you take the time to hit either one of those. It's been a rough week. Not only myself, but it looks like a number of other people in the NFL betting space dealing with some cold and flu symptoms. And so this episode very much brought to you by the good folks at Neocitrin. Sinus, nasal, sore throat pain, and headache relief gets you going. I feel like a Price is Right model in this situation, but that is very good stuff for anybody that gets into it. I don't know. Do you guys have that in the States or not? I would be curious to know, because that is in Canada a lifesaver for anybody that goes back with the old school remedies. I think that's been along for a long time. Old trick from mom and dad growing up when we all used to get sick as kids. So we'll battle through it. I will try not to sneeze or cough or anything as we make it through the show as well. I want to recap last week. We have a couple service comp winners. They are Tony S., Connor Whitaker, I think I missed an O, Danny J., and Alex Mish. Four of you guys left questions down below in the video, also in the live chat as well. Picked four of you guys. If you do not have an active subscription on raspicks.com, if you go over, you send a message to support, we'll get you set up. Even if you do have one, we'll add a couple credits to your plays for college basketball. Said we were going to do that last week. We will do it this week again as well. So as we go throughout the show, I'll pick out comments from the live chat. I'll also pick out comments from down below in the video. Last week, more than 5,000 views. We had about 80 comments in total, which was awesome to see. We'll pick out another handful of winners too. We'll add you guys to the service next week for college basketball and beyond as well. Let's check out a couple questions. A very good morning to Devin, Michael, Faduni. Oh, boy, I hope I'm saying your name right. Pardon me if I'm not. Jay Nava, Jay Karma back for another show. Graham R. Favorite hour of the week, he says. That's good to know. Over in the UK, listening late afternoon. Garrett, it's been rough. The throat nose and everything all together. Robert didn't chuck back any brandy, though. I may try that next time in replacement of the Neocitrin, but we'll see what happens with that. Connor says, looking healthy as ever. That's very debatable. Although we did upgrade the stream to 1080p, so maybe it's coming through a little bit more clear. It is what it is. Joe Lupo setting. Good morning to you as well. We're also seeing Moonfish back for another show too. Same with Brian Elfring. Buckley's here south of the border. Buckley's is horrible, but it absolutely works. I think that's the slogan they used on all the commercials for years as well. So that is very, very good stuff. The Buckley's Neocitrin combination, similar to the combination of Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. As always, let's start off with some high-low guys. We'll get into looking at what is going to be a fun week ahead. Pull up the market ratings from Inpredictable. Let me know in the chat who, when you're looking at this list, too high, too low. You can see on the left the rank from 1 to 32. Second column is last week's rating at this time, so any improvements. So, for example, if you're looking at a team like the Indianapolis Colts at 24, last week they were 17, downgraded 7 spots in total. That'll give you the example. Who is too high? Who is too low? How are you looking at these teams, and how do you have them rated? Last week on the show, I pointed out Denver being too low, and specifically on the defensive side. We'll certainly have thoughts on this game as we get to Sunday Night Football in a little bit, as we're looking at the Broncos now 19th up from 21st. But still, to me, that defensive rating, which you can see in the fourth column from the left, minus 1.4 points versus an average team, 24th. They have the defense rated. To me, that is still a number that's too low. Against the Bills on Monday night, that defense was flying around. Visually looked so much better than where they were earlier in the season. I really think that that's a unit that can continue trending up and looking a lot better. And like, if you look at these ratings as a whole, let's say that Broncos defense gets to like the 13, the 14 range in the league. When you're looking at what that is worth value-wise, if you go a couple spots down to New England, that defense represents about half a point better than an average team. And so if the Broncos there 1.5 points worse, you're adding 2 points to that Broncos rating overall. that could get them right into like that 12 to 13 range within the league, right around Jacksonville, Cleveland, New Orleans, where those teams are sitting between 0.1 and 1 point better than an average team. And so I do think there's still some room for Denver to climb, and that'll really be driven by the defense. Lots of comments coming in. Appreciate that very much. Connor says the Rams are way too high. They get back Matthew Stafford. That offense is probably properly rated with Stafford, I would say, at 14th. Interesting take there. Garrett says the Saints are way too high. I don't know what that defensive game plan was. Certainly cost me last week. I'm guessing cost folks on the stream as well, as Josh Dobbs was allowed to run wild. Good call by many people on the Josh Dobbs scrambling ability. Certainly has been their second most rushing yards for a quarterback. Caught me off surprise. I thought Dennis Allen would have had a much better game plan than what he did. He just let Dobbs do whatever he wanted in the pocket. So I see what you mean, Garrett, by that. Robert, Cleveland needs an adjustment. That's game number 2 on the schedule. I agree. We'll talk with that as well. Mikey says Arizona too low. They are down at, where are they? 30th overall. Certainly Kyler Murray looked a lot closer to what he was than I think what maybe some of us were expecting for two. Graham says Pittsburgh and the Chargers too high. Jets are too low. Jets offense 31st, defense 2nd. When you're looking at that ratings, that is the biggest split, similar to Cleveland, 26-1 between offense and defensive splits. So much of that rating for the Jets coming from the defense, but if they can ever just figure out something on offense, that is putrid to watch. And that was a backbreaker for me as well in a league that was a league that was full of games. It was just frustrating last week to look at. So I agree, if they can figure that out, look out for that one as well. Jets, Pete, wait, Atlanta is a league. I don't know what that means, but I don't know what Atlanta is either. So they might be a league at this point. I don't know how to classify what that team is. NB says Detroit too low. Mikey says Buffalo too high. Interesting there. Buffalo at 8th this week. Jay Karma, Dallas a bit high. Eagles are better. 1 spot difference, less than half a point separating those two. There we go, Jets, Pete. Wait, Atlanta is the league average team? Boy, is that a frustrating team to watch. If they ever just get semi-competent coaching and game planning, there's so much talent on that team. So, yep, certainly standing out differently for sure. Paul Enzo, how did the Pats jump 3 spots and the Colts fall 7 spots? These are all based off closing lines, and it always waits for opponents as well, based on how teams closed versus previous teams. And so because the Pats' schedule has been so brutally difficult, you'll tend to see their rating fluctuate a little bit just because of their other opponents looking better as the season progresses. Exact opposite for the Colts, very weak schedule. Those opponents continue to look worse. And so that's why you get some fluctuation with this. It's always consistently waiting for opponents. Lots of other comments. Boys too high for the Cowboys. Bills too high. Denver too low. More guys coming in. Max Osborne with the survivor question. We'll get to those at the end, Max. I'll answer that more specifically. A couple more for Eagles too low, which is interesting. Rich saying that as well. K-Hawk saying Detroit is better. Schedule is light. Detroit down at 9th. He's making the case for Detroit being higher. Good look all the way around. And so kind of just to summarize, my thoughts for those Broncos were a little bit too low, specifically on the defensive side of the football. In general, there was some hope potentially for the Jets at 26. And then there were some other comments with saying the Cowboys rated up too high. And we're also looking at the Saints too high. And then there was a big question mark on what are we going to get from Cleveland. Another interesting team I'd point out, Pittsburgh Steelers at 15th. Continue to find ways to win games despite being outviewed and overblown as well. Connor saying, I'm confused on your Rams view. You were the lone person fading them against Dallas, saying they were too high in the market, but didn't against Philly and Pittsburgh. Now it's 17th. They're properly rated. I don't think they're properly rated as a team as a whole. I think that defense can still drop lower than 25th. I do think we're starting to see them kind of level out a little bit in terms of some of these other teams are really starting to fall off too. 17th is still high. I'm not debating that, but I could see them, like last week they were 24th. I think that's a much better rating for them than where they are at 17th, but you can't deny that the Stafford comeback is a little bit of a bump for them as well. But I do think that they settle back in that mid-20s range for the season as we get to the end of it at the end of the year. And then Faduni says LAC too high at 10th overall. All right, good high-low. Let's get to the games. Before we do, want to bring up one more thing. The service over at Red Angle Sports is a full go for college basketball and has been going very well. 57% now over 50 plays to begin the season. The starter service had another good night last night as well. And so if you are getting into betting on college basketball, you are following it on a daily basis, even if you're not and you just want to add plus EV bets and higher expectation to win on stuff on a daily basis that's going into your accounts. Guys, this starter service, 10 plays for $99. It's the best intro offer Right Angle Sports has ever had into the college basketball service. Would really recommend trying it out, especially right now. Edge is the biggest it's going to be all season long as these teams are still getting bet like crazy with significant line movement every time a play goes out. There's just so much going on. And I will say that the effort and clarity that you're starting to see from the team, just giving you a bit of like insight behind the scenes. First couple days of the season were a bit up and down. Was right around break even, but things are really starting to click and you can see it kind of dialing in. And Bryce says college basketball is on a heater and it's really starting to click and heat up. And these guys have had so much success early on in the season. And so if you want to get over to the service right now, raspicks.com/order, 10 plays for $99, the best intro offer that we've ever had. These plays go out at 2 p.m. Pacific time. So if you're looking at something that's maybe easier to get down because of your daily schedule, maybe you're working in the morning, something like that, and you're not able to do it, these are really accessible. And it all goes through the site. If you're looking at the YouTube shows and maybe you've had some difficulty there, through the site, it's really efficient, really effective. Lots of good feedback about how the plays are going out live on the website. It's a no-brainer. And I know there's some bias, but you really got to try that out. 10 plays for $99, or you can go 25 for $245. And that'll probably take you into the late portion of November. So I really recommend trying that out. And of course, the flagship is there. If the service as a whole is not for you, or you're still a little bit unsure, you can always sign up for the free plays as well. There's a couple per week that go out. There's no charge. You're not paying for anything. raspicks.com/register. You'll get the free plays sent to you. You'll get a text and an email notification, and you can go over and log in. But I'm telling you, obviously NFL kind of isolated the Thursday and Sunday the rest of the way. You got the Monday nighter too, but it's kind of one day of focus. College basketball, obviously, every single day. So if you're looking to just add things into what you're betting on a regular daily basis, this starter service or the free plays are an absolute must. So I really encourage everybody to get over to raspicks.com and get into that. Let's get to some football. I'll preface the week by saying that it's kind of I don't want to call it frustrating, but there's been a lot of things that have moved sort of right before I wanted to get into them. There's a couple things still sitting, a lot of big favorites. It's kind of, I don't want to call it like a wonky, weird week, but there's just some weird things going on within the games. And so we'll get into all of those. We'll talk about every side. We'll talk about every total, and we'll get that all squared up for you. David, they're all released individually through the service. It'll take about 5 to 7 minutes per release time as you go. So yeah, it's a tricky week. I'll hopefully give some insight to each side and total that you can run and use. But a lot of stuff has kind of been bet into a pretty good spot as a whole. Thursday night football, fun game. Bengals on the road at the Ravens. Ravens currently a soft 4-point favorite with a total in this game of 46. So perfect example here. Like the over initially, for those listening to the podcast Sunday night, if you were able to make it through the sniffling and the coughing and the heavy breathing, you would have sort of heard that, like, hey, this total is way too low. It opened at 43.5. Ravens got bet over last week. Bengals got bet over last week in a big way. A lot of interest in both of these teams over. Now they're playing each other, and we see that coming to fruition with this total now out to 46. I wouldn't be running to bet it at 46, but I do think the expectation for points is pretty high. When you look at the Bengals injury situation on the defensive side, Trey Hendrickson was listed as a uphill battle to climb to get on the field for Thursday night. You're also likely without Sam Hubbard as well. So two key defensive players in the front seven for Cincinnati you're going to be missing. Baltimore has come out and said they want to run the football a little bit more. Harbaugh said he wants to get Keaton Mitchell more involved, and he was kind of neglected in that game last week against Cleveland. That was a very good Cleveland run defense up front. And so you can kind of see how the Ravens game plan changed off of that. I think it's going to be quite different, and it's going to be a bit of a change overall to what we've seen from last week too, with a little bit more run involvement. There is some concern with Ronnie Stanley up front for the Ravens, best offensive lineman. He's dealing with some issues as well, re-aggravated that knee injury. I think he's going to be a long shot to go as well. So you're looking at kind of a lot of things going on up front, potentially Ravens changing, probably going to be a lot of interest in those Mitchell props as well. I do think that both of these teams playing each other in this spot lead to points. But again, that total has been bet up. From the side perspective, I think we're locked in at 3.5 or 4. We've seen Bengals money at 4.5. We've also seen Bengals money at 4, but we've seen Ravens money come back the other way at an expensive 3 or 3.5. And so we have kind of bracketed opinions here from different pros on Cincinnati and Baltimore. So I think from the side perspective, we're just kind of locked in at this point. And so this to me, unfortunately, is probably going to be a stay away. I feel like the Mitchell props specifically are a little bit scary. Everyone's going to talk about it because that Harbaugh quote was so obvious. You essentially have 4 guys that are running the football for Baltimore. And if this is going to be a run-focused game plan, slightly more than weeks past, you are dealing with kind of that split between each of those 4 guys. And that just gives me a little bit of hesitance. It's not like this clear guy getting the role change and getting bumped up necessarily because you have all these other run potentials. You also have to look at the Cincinnati Bengals. It was another week last week against Houston where these safeties were just getting exposed in coverage. And you start to wonder what Cincinnati is going to do to combat this. I know there's this Lou Anarumo second half angle where he's always able to make these adjustments, but Cincinnati consistently is, when they step up against good offenses, these 2 guys back there that were changed in the offseason with 2 vets departing just have not played to that same standard that we're used to from a Bengals defense. And so how is Baltimore potentially going to be able to expose that? That's a big hole to look at as well. So unfortunately, a stay away for me, but this was a very good over earlier in the week. Maybe we get something in, maybe setting up in play. Wouldn't mind that as well. You're also watching for T. Higgins too. Forget to mention for the Bengals dealing with an injury as well. He looks like he's more unlikely to play than likely at this point too. We have a comment from Rich. Hard not to look at the primetime under run. I mean, we're getting 2 solid offenses going at it in this spot. I know that this is popular, and I know everyone wants to talk about this with how many unders continue to come in and people piling on that. But I do think that this game is definitely going to play out differently. So I would not be looking to back the under here at 46. I do think we get points in this one, but just with that movement early, which was a strong disagreement and a strong position against those primetime unders, it would be a stay away. Let's get over to Sunday. Steelers on the road at the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland, a 1.5 point favorite at Chris right now, 2 at Circa, seeing 1.5s everywhere else that is posting a number. We have Deshaun Watson ruled out for the season. For those of you who listen to the podcast, you probably got some sneaky remarks indicating maybe Watson's not able to go. And then what does it look like without him? PJ Walker will not be the starter. It is going to be DTR starting for Cleveland. PJ Walker was as bad as it gets. I know we got a couple wins. A lot of those missed field goal, kind of the fluky comeback, late drive. Any numbers or stats that you look at for PJ Walker over the last season, 10 seasons, 5 seasons, however you want to make this sample, he is historically bad and way at the bottom of some of these lists. Like, it's awful for PJ Walker. And so as bad as DTR has looked, there's other people that I respect that think he may be worse than PJ Walker, which is hard to believe. As bad as PJ Walker has looked, though, I don't know if it's a drop from PJ Walker to DTR necessarily. There is obviously a clear drop from Watson to either one of these guys. However, what stands out to me in this game specifically is we were at Cleveland -4. And so if we think back to the two games where Watson was ruled out late, and it was the late switch. It was the Indy game, and then there was another game off the top of my head. I'm forgetting the opponent. Still a little foggy. But there was twice where it happened really late week, and Watson was ruled out. And both of those games were sitting right around Cleveland -3.5. And we saw it. The game did not go through the key number of 3. It was the Baltimore game. Thank you, Matt. He was the scratch of the morning. The number did not go through the field goal on the Watson use. This was Cleveland -4. Watson use comes in. We're now through the field goal to 1.5. And so we're looking at more of an adjustment on this Watson absence than we have seen with any of the other examples of Watson missing a game so far this season. And it sort of now becomes a point of disagreement. And something that was said by Michael Craig, who's one of the sharpest bettors that there is, part of the team at Right Angle Sports, was that he was intrigued by Cleveland at potentially getting a discount because of the quarterback news switching. And that's kind of what we're seeing, but almost like accelerated a little bit within this. You have now a revenge spot for Cleveland. They obviously lose that primetime game to Pittsburgh earlier in the year. The Steelers in that box score were one of the most fortunate teams to ever win a football game that I have seen. They had the big play to Pickens for 71 yards. But if you take that and just put it on the side, the Steelers finished with 150 yards. They scored 26 points. They had negative yardage in the fourth quarter against this Browns defense and scored 14 points in that quarter. And so it's defensive touchdowns. It was turnovers. It was everything leading the way for the Steelers to benefit from that. And you try to see a path for how the Steelers can potentially change that. And it's like, is the inclusion of Jaylen Warren into this offense more going to be the thing that flips that and changes that? I just don't know. And so I'm looking at Cleveland here at -1.5. And that is certainly a side of interest because I just think that this has gone a little bit too far. And the Steelers, to me, are a team that are just sort of ripe to be faded. It's not something that it's a bit of a falling knife scenario. We're trying to catch it at the right time, and they just continuously week after week find ways. But this just seems like a spot where now you're getting sort of the discounted price because of that has gone too far. There's comparison a couple weeks ago to how far Watson was worth. Now it's extra. To me, I would look at the Browns here at -1.5. Bryce Miller brings up a point for the total. How low is too low in this total? 34. You have two great defenses. You have the league's best defense ratings-wise against Kenny Pickett. And on the other side, you have DTR. So it's very much a preseason total, but it's very much two preseason rosters essentially playing each other on offense against two good defenses. Patrick brings up a point. Pittsburgh have improved dramatically since then, and that's referencing the first meeting. Maybe. I would say that Cleveland from that game have got worse. I think that that's more fair than saying that Pittsburgh has improved. Cleveland now without starting left and right tackle. They obviously had Nick Chubb for that game where he was hurt. They obviously had Deshaun Watson for that game as well. And so I would say that that's more fair than saying that Pittsburgh has improved dramatically overall. Jake says, do you like the Pitt Cleveland under with Cleveland strong D and weaker offense? Not at 34. I'm not running in to bet that at 34. Elite says, I know you should never tease totals, but in preseason, it's common to tease totals down under 30. Would you consider that in season? So this is for those of you who watched the midseason reset video with Matthew Davidow in week 9. He was talking about edge cases that are difficult to price. I don't remember the last time we've seen a regular season total in a non-weather impacted game at 34. This could certainly fall into that range. I don't have the specific numbers on totals. Like you mentioned, the teasing of totals in the preseason where able. So many books have not made those available anymore because of how profitable they have been. So you can certainly see this being a very popular teaser leg within the side and the total. And certainly the total is going to be of intrigue for a lot of pros as well for how that is being teased, because it's essentially a preseason market number that you're looking at during the regular season, which is becoming very, very hard to price. So that's a very good point by you, but I don't have the specific numbers on that and what that looks like with a total teased at 33.5 or 34.5. I've seen ESPN bet mentioned twice by David, and then someone asked for my thoughts on it as well. That's obviously a big story within the betting space. Elite Deed asked for, what's your take on ESPN bet? I don't have an opinion. We obviously don't have it here. Something that I'll have to look into. But I'm curious in the comments if you guys are playing at it. How have you found it? What is it looking like? Is it just a duplicate of Penn? I'd be curious to know what you guys or a duplicate of Barstool on that app that Penn had. Curious to know what you guys think in the chat. Let me know. But it's interesting to see it mentioned a couple times here all the way around. Jay, we'll get to Survivor questions at the end of this. Please we'll circle back to those as we get through it. Cardinals on the road at the Houston Texans. Houston, a 5-point favorite. Total in this game, 47.5. This total at Chris opened 49. It has come down a little bit since then to 47.5. That was a pretty big number for an Arizona offense. This game, when it was 6 for Houston, there was a lot of money coming in on Arizona. That was a big early week position taken by pros. This was another one of those situations where, like, if you listen to the Sunday night podcast, I was like, here's a side that stands out in Arizona, getting that many points with the offensive upgrade for Murray, with how good Houston looked. The big thing for me that stood out was, okay, Houston Texans have done a lot of their work all season as a dog or a very short favorite. We look back just a couple weeks ago, they were closing 2.5-point favorites at home to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were now earlier in the week 6-point favorites. Currently this morning, 5-point favorites at home to the Arizona Cardinals. Is the gap between the Buccaneers and the Cardinals now, who have Murray back under center, is it that big? Like, how are we getting to this price and this role change and this difference for Houston? It sure seemed like an inflated number off of the win on the road at Cincinnati for Houston. With all that said, you look back at Arizona, that was a team that was trailing to Atlanta late in the game. And despite Murray getting back into the offense, it wasn't like this dramatic turnaround for the Cardinals offense as a whole. I think, like, emotionally, it was the big switch and you get your guy back under center, but it wasn't just like dramatically night and day difference. And you're like, okay, this is a team that's on the ascend and we're going to be looking at playing them every week going forward. So on the other side, you're looking at a Houston team that is continuing to improve on offense, is continuing to get better every single week, despite injuries on the O-line, despite injuries to skill guys. CJ Stroud is just clicking at every point that he's tested. And the interesting angle that kind of sits within this is we have DeMeco Ryans, the head coach of the Houston Texans, who got his best guy in coverage back last week. And when we think about where DeMeco Ryans comes from, he comes from San Francisco, so with the Niners for a number of seasons. If we think about where Kyler Murray has played all of his ball, it's in the NFC West, matched up against the 49ers a number of times as well. There's a ton of familiarity here with DeMeco Ryans as the head coach, running the defense, going up against Arizona and Kyler Murray under center. And so that's a little bit of an interesting side plot that I think really does matter within this spot. And so I think that's a big benefit for Houston in what is usually like kind of a weird and awkward out of conference matchup. And you also start to kind of look at this and wonder, with some of these AFC teams and some of the opponents that they're playing frequently on a week-to-week basis, like, are we maybe seeing some of these AFC contenders maybe priced a little bit shy of what they should be because of who they're playing, whereas these NFC teams kind of getting the benefit of the doubt by playing weaker competition? And is there kind of like a pricing divide within the market because of that? And so, interesting spot. I see Houston got bet just before we came on air. The 4s turned into 5s, but a interesting matchup spot. And so what long-winded way of getting to say that, like, hey, we're going from a spot where early in the week I liked Arizona at 6. Now we're looking at Houston at 5, and all these cases that I'm thinking, they're like, okay, how can this work? How can you get there? How can this role be different? I kind of am more intrigued by Houston at this point as the week goes on at -5 than I am with Kyler Murray and Arizona. The remote working nomad, which I think used to be Adam Copperweight, if I'm not mistaken, change of name on the YouTube account. Isn't that different with Gannon at head coach? Not necessarily. I think it's more different with Petzing at OC. did anything just because the system is a little different. But in terms of defending him contained and knowing what to expect, D'Amico Ryans is as qualified as any to put together that defensive game plan quite a bit. And then that's kind of referencing this. Do you think it differs in the way Cliff used Kyler versus the way Gannon planned to use him? No, because it didn't look all that significantly different. Obviously, formation-wise, they weren't running the 4 and 5 wide receiver sets at the same rate that you were. But in terms of what it takes to contain and defend them, Ryan's pretty prepared for that as well. Jake Levin, Arizona, Houston over 47.5 with Kyler back. No opinion on the total for me on that one. You're probably on the side that I would pick if forced to do it, but nothing strong from my side. Chargers on the road at the Green Bay Packers. Chargers 3-point favorites across the board. Total in this game 44. You have Justin Herbert -3 against Jordan Love. Initial sort of reaction is it's maybe a touch short, but I'm just really worried about this Chargers offense. And that's maybe a weird thing to say after they put up 38 against the Lions. We'll talk about the Lions in a bit. I think that Lions defense just brutally overrated. But when we look at the Chargers, it is Keenan Allen and nothing beyond it on offense. And Justin Herbert is making a lot out of very, very little. And I get worried when you're going into games backing the Chargers as favorites when this offense is as limited skill position wise as it is. And I don't know consistently if they're going to be able to put up big games when they're on the road and you're relying on Guyton and you're relying on Quentin Johnston and you're relying on Eckler on running back passes out of the backfield to be the brunt of your offense. It worries me quite a bit. Eckler banged up as well. It worries me quite a bit going forward with the Chargers. And I think the way we think about the Chargers versus what they're actually putting on the field is so different. And there's such a change in tone about what this offense wanted to be versus what they are and how they're going forward that it just gives me quite a bit of worry within that. Now, with that said, the Packers offense 2 weeks in a row where they've been able to do something at least. You can point to the Steelers game, say it's a bit of a misleading box score potentially. I don't know if I buy it. This is another offense that I'm just struggling to see a whole lot from. Aaron Jones makes such a difference out of the backfield. The way that he opens it up can't be discounted. But again, you're just watching them against the Steelers, and it's drive after drive that just seems so strenuous to try get anything done. One thing that I would point out is potentially Jordan Love with his legs could be an angle worth considering. We'll see what his rushing props open at, but that's a number that weekly has been bet around quite a bit. So if you're getting it in like the low teens, that could be quite interesting to look at, as the Chargers are a team that just sit in a lot of these zone looks that just kind of invite quarterbacks sitting in the pocket and finding a way to scramble out, especially if that edge rush is there as well. So that's something to maybe look at as the week gets a little bit later. But no real thoughts here on the side of the total for me. It would be a pass. Murray says Love looked almost competent versus the Steelers. Right. So it's 2 weeks in a row against the Rams defense, which is really poor, and then against a solid Steelers defense that's getting guys back, albeit without Minkah Fitzpatrick back there last week. You start to look at it and you're like, okay, maybe there can be something here. But then you look kind of just down to down stats, success rate down to down, and it's just being clouded a little bit by bigger plays as a whole. And so to me, it's a stay away on both the side and the total. Giants on the road at the Commanders. Washington, believe it or not, still as high as a 10-point favorite across the board. 9.5 Chris, 9 at Circa. There was a group that came in and bet the Giants last week right around, it was midweek as well. They took 17 and some 17.5s on the Giants, and that was never close, was in doubt the whole way. And we're seeing now again another midweek buy on the Giants, taking away the 10s, turning those into 9.5s. Boy, with the Giants' injuries within the secondary, going to be down multiple cornerbacks, likely down their best linebacker as well. They're just void of pieces all over. There's nothing so far that has indicated that there's going to be a QB change from DeVito. And now you're looking at a spot where Dayball and Martindale on the sidelines last week kind of had some interactions that looked like there was some tension there. It's like, what are you getting from this Giants team at all? There is no way that I could comfortably run and lay Commanders 9.5 necessarily, just because this is such a big removal from what we've seen the Commanders at all season. And are they really the team that's going to go out and just run the Giants out of the building? I'm not necessarily sure that's true. Now, they've made offensive line changes. The offense has looked better the last couple of weeks. Howell has been able to get the ball out of his hand a lot quicker. That's prevented those drive-ending sacks that have just been killers for Washington all season long. But I look at Washington, I'm like, this is not a team that's going to get up 3 touchdowns and run out to a lead, even if it is against the Giants. But I can't get to the Giants because of all these defensive injuries that are added in as well, that I think are just going to be crippling to them as a whole. And so super short total at 37. I'd be much more inclined to look at some Commanders props. I don't know what the Giants game plan is going to be for defending McLaurin. Last week against Seattle, Washington got the bulk of their passing yardage from running back passes. Those are probably going to be in play again. But I think we have to see a game here where McLaurin has a pretty big impact. And so that would be a guy that I would certainly circle against this Giants secondary, which is just without so many pieces. And you know that Martindale is going to try blitz Sam Howell because of all the stats and all the angles about the sacks that have been out there and so public. Wink doesn't change on a weekly basis. And so it's going to be Howell throwing against the blitz. And now these defenders for New York on the backside are going to be backups, and they're going to be exposed in matchups. And so I don't think Howell's going to hit on all of them. I think there's going to be some big plays, though. I think McLaurin is certainly going to have the potential to have a pretty big game within this spot as well. But it's not a number that I would lay with the Commanders at all. Titans on the road at the Jags. We are looking at Jacksonville, a 6.5-point favorite. I think it's a matter of time on this. This will turn into a 7-point favorite spot for the Jags. We're looking at the total 39.5 at Chris, 40 everywhere else except for DK, who has 39.5. I think this is a over spot for this game when you're looking at 39.5 or 40. We'll call it 40. And this is really just based off of schedule primarily. You look at the Tennessee Titans. What are they as an offense? They're a run-first offense that like to utilize Derrick Henry, like to use Spears when he needs to come in as a change of pace. They like to keep the game relatively competitive, reduce the variance, but primarily their offense runs through their running backs on the ground. Think about who they have faced since Will Levis has come into the league as a starter. They last week played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Nobody can run on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The week prior, they played the Atlanta Falcons. Nobody can run on the Atlanta Falcons. And then they had a third game mixed in there as well, who all of a sudden, off the top of my head, you can tell I'm not feeling well because it's not clicking as well as it usually does. They had a third game in there as well against a top run defense as well. The Pittsburgh Steelers were mixed in there too on the short week. That's who it was. And they got Hayward back in the middle of the defensive line. And that he's their best run defender. And so that Pittsburgh run defense stat is skewed. So you have 3 games in a row since Levis took over as the starter against solid defenses, great run defense fronts. Tennessee hasn't been able to run the ball effectively. They had a big game from Henry on Thursday Night Football, but it's really limited what they can do. Now you get a Jags defense, which you're going to have to throw on. And so you're also going to get the ability to have some run support too for the Tennessee Titans. Finally, a bit of a reprieve for this run game. So I think from the Titans offense, it's going to work out. Will Levis, through 3 weeks, has thrown for at least 10.5 air yards on average throw every single game. And so his average since he took over is around 11 yards, intended air yards per throw. So he's chugging it deep. It's just kind of like do or die situations. There's nothing sustained. It's big plays or nothing. But if you have this run game support now added in for the first time, and you're going to allow him to not have to be forcing the ball downfield every single throw, that's a big boost for the Titans offense as a whole. On the other side, Jags a very similar situation. Out of the bye, they play San Francisco. Then the weeks before that, they had the Steelers in the rain, and then they had the Saints. And so it's both of these teams over the last month playing just dead under teams with good defenses, with good front sevens. And now all of a sudden you have the Jags coming off of those 3 games and playing a Titans pass funnel defense that is great against the run and is forcing you to pass. And so we're going to see Lawrence with a ton of attempts. We're going to see the Jags throwing it more. And we're also going to see the Titans secondary now exposed for the first time since trading away their best defender. Because as we mentioned, not only have the Titans played a stretch of teams that are very good defensively, but they haven't played any good quarterbacks in this stretch. Desmond Ridder, Baker Mayfield, Kenny Pickett. Right now they're stepping up to face Trevor Lawrence. And so it's just kind of, I think, a suppressed number because of how these two teams have played based on opponents. And now you're getting just a really short price within this one that I think should absolutely be a higher number all the way around. So looking at that one, that would be the way that I would look at this game. Not really any thoughts on the side in this one. Bears on the road at the Lions. Detroit, a 9-point favorite, with the exception of Pinnacle, where they are 8.5. Same thing, FanDuel. I guess you can call that 8.5 minus 20 over at FanDuel. Total in this game up to as high as 48. Frustrating one for me again. I liked Chicago coming into the week. Hitman stole this one yesterday. He came out with the release for those of you who follow him and the media that he does. I thought that was a good bet on Chicago at 10. Reason being, we're going to see Justin Fields back under center for Chicago. That is a boost. A fun fact that most people may be unaware of: the Chicago Bears have a positive net success rate so far through 10 weeks, believe it or not. And that's offense versus defense. I think many people look at this Bears team and think bottom 5 in the league, bottom 3 in the league, whatever you want to put them as, quietly have been kind of sneaky good. And I say sneaky good as like an average team in the NFL, slightly above average when you look at net success rate. So there's some pieces there. And a lot of this is being driven by the defense, which has improved a ton against the run. And they've also got a lot of guys back in the secondary healthy. And that's been a big boost overall to this defense. So that was kind of where you're looking at it. You get the uptick from Fields coming back. You have a Bears defense that's quietly performing relatively well. And you kind of have them trending well, now getting 10 points on the road. And so that's how I was looking at it. Now that it's into the point where we're below 10, that's not of interest to me. But something that stands out to me within this is you're looking at a spot where it's the Lions just steamrolling bad teams all season long. And you wonder here if there's maybe a little bit of a slow start for Fields, if the Lions laying a big number, which is unusual for them. They did it against the Panthers. But we just, in this Dan Campbell era for the Lions, we just haven't seen them in this role of a double-digit favorite. You start to wonder, like, okay, if Fields maybe starts a little bit slow, maybe he's not as mobile, all of a sudden, like maybe you're looking at a spot where this Lions offense, with this offensive line back healthy, both running backs out of the backfield, running extremely well, fit in really good. The one thing that I would add into this is the Lions have the shortest week of any team all season long coming up as they play this game. And then right away, it's the quick turnaround for the early Thanksgiving game on Thursday. And so that's a bit of maybe a little bit of an interesting quirk to consider when you're looking at it, as you're laying this big number with a team that certainly is well motivated, certainly is being very well coached this season. Maybe not the team to take a foot off the gas in the division game, but something to consider in the back of your mind overall as well. But that's how I'd look at it. So it's a pass from this point, but thought that Bears bet earlier yesterday was a pretty good number to be taken. Raiders on the road at the Miami Dolphins. Miami, a 13-point favorite. Total in this game, 46.5. This was, again, like I hate to be referencing things, but this is kind of like the point of the week that I'm trying to make. Was there was a lot of really good early stuff that was taken. Dolphins fit into that. This sets up for just a massive Miami blowout. And whether or not that's conducive to laying 2 touchdowns, argument can be made, no. But I think Miami can run up the score here in a big way. Let's talk about a couple things here. There were quotes on Monday in the presser from defensive players that were coming out, and they're like, the defense is clicking. The defense is coming together. The defense is starting to be what we want it to be. This was Vic Fangio taking over a defense who historically has needed that 8 to 10 week window in previous stops to get everything right. And we saw this year, the Dolphins defense was certainly on a trajectory where it could be one of the better units in the league. But they were hampered with injuries in September that really prevented this defensive scheme shift from happening and occurring. Now everybody's healthy. Now the Dolphins are coming out of the bye, following a game where they defended the Chiefs exceptionally well, with the exception of the opening 10 minutes of the game. But like that Miami defense in the Germany game against Kansas City looked really good. This is a Dolphins defense that can continue to trend up and is going to finish the year, if healthy, as one of the best units in the league. And so now the Raiders, who couldn't move the ball against the Jets, a very good defense, have to go on the road away from this Las Vegas reset to face this defense. That's going to be a massive challenge for Aiden O'Connell on the road. I don't see the Raiders having much success at all. And when you think from just a game planning perspective, you have Vic Fangio against a play caller with 2 games under his belt and a head coach who wants to run the football and punch the opponent in the mouth, right? Like, how is that going to work out? It's not going to work out well. And so we're now starting to see things really start to click overall for this Dolphins defense, which is a scary thought. On the other side, the Raiders defense has played the Jets and the Giants since this reset. Now they're playing the Miami Dolphins and Mike McDaniel out of the bye, right? This sets up for as bad of a scenario as there can be. The Raiders defense, the way that they play in coverage, the way that their safeties play is just going to be stressed so much against this Dolphins run game. And you're hearing quotes from the offense with Devon Achane potentially back in the backfield about how this offense is clicking and how during the bye they were sorting everything out. I mean, you look at this matchup and it just screams Miami blowout and it screams my own Miami offensive outburst. I mean, you're looking at this and it just, everything points to Miami hanging a really big number on the Raiders, and this whole dance party, cigar smoking, celebratory reset for the Raiders coming to a pretty gross end now that they're outside of Las Vegas and now that they're not playing the Jets or the Giants. And so big game ahead for Miami by the looks of it. Cowboys on the road at the Carolina Panthers. Dallas, a 10.5-point favorite, 11 at Chris total in this game, 42.5. What I would say about this one is the Cowboys. Okay, we'll flip it around. I want to take the Panthers, but I don't know if I'm fully going to be able to. It's hard. I look at this as just a brutal spot for the Cowboys situation in the league. Last week, they had the division game. They pulled the starters early in the fourth quarter. Everything is comfortable. They had the Thanksgiving division game on deck with the short week on Thursday. And you had this Carolina travel game split in the middle of it. And it just, the Cowboys team laying this price on the road in this spot with their willingness to take the foot off the gas in the second half just seems like a spot where you might get them underachieving. And it reminds me a lot of that Arizona spot in week 3 where a very similar thing happened. And so you have that on one side, right? And it's like, okay, this is an angle that I can get excited about fading. Then you move to the other side. And I'm as disappointed and as wrong as anybody has been in the last 3 weeks about what the Panthers offense could change into. I think we all celebrated and got a win when the Panthers covered against the Texans in that first game of the offensive reset that never happened. But now you're like, what's out there for the Panthers on offense? They're making another play caller switch. Frank Reich is taking back play calling, so he's going to be calling plays today. Thomas Brown, the era lasted 3 weeks. He's out. Now you're looking at a spot where it's like, what are you going to get from the Panthers? And I against this Cowboys defense, I don't know. Nobody's getting open for Carolina. There's no pass blocking help. There's nothing happening out of the backfield. It's getting awfully tough. Now, what I will say is a potential boost for Carolina is they get CJ Henderson, very likely back within the defensive backfield. You're also going to get J.C. Horn, very likely returning in the defensive backfield too. So that is the 2 best defenders within that secondary who have not been on the field together for more than a month and a half, coming back for Carolina. Brian Burns likely to play. That'll be a big boost. He's their second best linebacker, arguably the best within that defense, middle of the field. And then you have Ian Thomas, the tight end, who's been on IR. He's coming back as well, What was interesting in quotes and comments was he is labeled as the best pass blocking and run blocking tight end on the Panthers team. And so maybe a little bit of offensive line help. But you have at least the Panthers getting some key guys back. This has been a secondary that's been rated between 30th and 32nd all season long, and they may have their two best starters back for this game, which against the Cowboys team that's throwing the football a ton could be a bit of a benefit to helping slowing down what this Cowboys offense can do. And so that's how I look at this game. No hurry to do anything here because I think this number is only going to tick up as the week goes on. Buccaneers on the road at the 49ers. We're looking at San Francisco, a 12-point favorite at circa 11.5 everywhere else. Total in this game sitting at 41 across the board. The over is interesting in this game. If you can get out of your mind Baker Mayfield dropping back and looking at this 49ers defense playing off with their front four rushing with Chase Young now integrated into the fold and him just being a sitting duck in the pocket like we've seen other teams. Here's why I would say that the overs may be a little bit interesting in this game. Tampa Bay, when forced to play catch-up, when forced to throw the football downfield, when forced to push on offense, is an interesting offense to look at because they speed up, their aggression goes up, and they have good wide receivers who can make big plays. One area where the 49ers have struggled on defense is when forced to defend elite wide receivers out wide on more of a one-on-one basis. And so if you're looking at like the prospect of Mike Evans or Chris Godwin finding space and be able to make catches, that's certainly there. The biggest issue with betting this over is when the Buccaneers are competitive within games and when they're in close games, their willingness to run the football on first and second down is absurdly high. And so if you're looking at this point spread and you're looking at this total and you're saying, okay, the 49ers can very likely build a lead in this game very early. That could force the Buccaneers into throwing more and needing to be pushed more. If you think about what the Buccaneers do defensively, they're incredibly good at stopping the run. Kyle Shanahan is very good at putting together week-to-week game plans. This is going to be a spot where the 49ers throw the football more than they run early in the game. I don't look at this as a spot where Shanahan is just going to try out-scheme the Buccaneers run front and push the ball on the ground. He's going to be throwing the football. That's how you have success against Tampa Bay, and he's certainly going to be able to find it. But you're going to have the 49ers throwing, and if they can build the lead, you're going to have the Buccaneers throwing. And then you have great wide receivers across the board on both sides against defenses that are weaker at defending the pass than they are against the run. And I think you're going to have some offensive success where the Buccaneers could be pushed into it. You have the sort of like small scenario where the Buccaneers stay competitive, which would be problematic for this total because it's just going to slow the Buccaneers offense down completely. But definitely something to consider when you look at this with a pretty short total. But we have seen a couple times where the 49ers have got these bigger leads against weaker teams, and then they've just kind of taken the foot off the gas and slowed down the game. But I do think that the Buccaneers trailing can find a little bit of success within this. What I would say, too, from the side, we saw the Bucs at Buffalo. They closed right around the 7.5-point favorite. We saw the Buccaneers against the Eagles earlier in the season. They were closing like shy of a touchdown. That got bet down pretty low. Now that this is out to 11, and I know the Niners top in market ratings everywhere, and I know the Niners are very highly regarded, especially with Williams back, with Deebo Samuel back. This offense is completely different. But this is quite a premium for the 49ers price-wise. And so I could not be looking at San Francisco from the side perspective, but I do think that total is potentially interesting based on how this one may be forced to play out. Seahawks on the road at the Rams. This is right around the pick 'em currently. Some ones showing up as well, but they're cheap ones for the Seahawks favored on the road. When I'm looking at this game specifically, we kind of talked about it within the ratings wise, where the Rams got the bump up because of Stafford's likely return. I do think that that's going to be a boost to the Rams offense that we haven't seen in a couple of weeks. I mean, since basically week 6, 7, it was all about fading the Rams on this show. They're now down kind of pretty low. And again, I don't know if I agree with that bump up. I'm kind of stuck in the middle, looking at it overall. When you look at this matchup, it's hard to ignore how tough the Rams have played Seattle. And I think it's also tough to ignore that the Seahawks box score and production on offense have just not really matched visually what is going on within the field. I think that the Seahawks offense overperforming just a little bit to this point. And so I don't think highly of the Rams defense overall, but the Seahawks offense at 11th, that to me seems like they're being rated a little bit too highly. And Michael brings it up. 0-6 ATS in their last 6 games against the Rams. I didn't know it was that one-sided, but that certainly stands out. Benuni says, if Stafford is in, Rams win by a touchdown or more. It sure feels to me like the Rams are going to be the side in this game, as the Seahawks offense is just a little bit overrated. It just feels like it's not fully clicking there. They can't figure out the backfield. Kenneth Walker has not been effective running. They're trying to mix in Charbonnet more. And even that game against Washington was just strenuous and tricky for them to get around. And that should have been a very comfortable spot for them against that bad secondary. And so this is a spot to me where I think the Rams shape up as the side, as much as I may disagree with how they're sort of rated. And so I see a lot of interest from other people in backing the Rams. And that's enough to make me want to lean that way as well. Jets on the road at the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo, a 7-point favorite with a total in this game of 40. This was 6.5 for a minute yesterday. We're now back to 7 for the Bills. Ken Dorsey is out. This is an interesting spot now with Joe Brady taking over. That was clearly a scapegoat firing for Sean McDermott, just protecting himself. And Dorsey was sort of forced to take the blame for that one. Ken Dorsey was not the reason that this Bills offense was struggling. And now we have kind of a split within this, where there's the stats that show the Bills are top 5 in offense against any stat you want to look at. And you're like, well, how can this offense be underperforming and have issues? Like, they're top 5 in this, and this. Nick Costos had a brilliant rant about it. And then there's what they're doing on the field when you're watching it visually. And what stands out most to me is let's paint the timeline here of the Bills, right? And just kind of go through this. In the offseason, the Bills drafted Dalton Kincaid because Ken Dorsey wanted to change this offense from how it finished last year, which was this predictable 3 wide receiver set usage with Allen running a ton. He wanted to switch that because defenses were adapting to it and change it into an offense that used 2 tight end sets more, had more of a traditional ground game, and that's what he wanted it to be. And for the first 6 weeks of the season, it was that. Buffalo was right at the top of the league for 2 tight end usage after being right at the bottom last year, right? That offensive shift happened. They had Cook out of the backfield mixed in with Latavius Murray. Josh Allen, his rushing props tanked because he wasn't running the football. We saw that change happen. Players weren't necessarily thrilled about it, but the Bills' offense was comfortably moving the ball downfield. There was McDermott from the sideline approving of all of this because it was a way to protect his defense, because if the Bills were operating from that, there was likely to be less explosive plays. They were going to be operating from a slower tempo. They were going to be holding the ball for longer. That was going to make McDermott's defense, which he took over, look better. So he was all with that. Then you had the injury to Dawson Knox. And verbally, everything coming from Bills players changed. Because what did the Bills end up doing in that Buccaneers game? We saw it. They reverted because it's like, okay, we don't have 2 tight ends anymore. We're going to put Kincaid as a true wide receiver, and they called it 11.5 personnel. We're going to use him in that wide receiver role. We're going to spread the field. Allen's going to run more. We're going to go no huddle, and we're going to find success doing it. And they absolutely have when they've gone to that. And now there's this divide within the locker room a little bit, because you have Allen going on media and shows saying, we love when we do that. I'm way more comfortable when we're playing from no huddle and up tempo. I love when we spread the field. I love when we can run. I want all of this. And McDermott's not backing it. And Dorsey was stuck in the middle. Now you remove Dorsey and you have Joe Brady as a bit of like a stand-in internal promotion that McDermott can likely control. And I'm not looking at this as something that's drastically going to change anything for Buffalo, because I think the root problem for the Bills is that you have a head coach that wants to control the offensive philosophy that is limiting what this offense can be and how effective it can be. And so now you have the players wanting to do one thing, which works very well when the Bills go in to do it. And you have a head coach wanting another thing, which is slowing everything down for the Bills, reducing their offensive output. And now you have Joe Brady, kind of the unknown, who comes from Carolina, where he struggled mightily. And I don't see him as just being a guy that's going to change any of this and come in with a mandate that switches the offense. So I think all these issues for the Bills offense are still going to be there. The luck factor is really going to determine how the Bills end up finishing the season, because Josh Allen has the lowest turnover-worthy play rate of his career, despite having the most turnovers, right? So people are saying Josh Allen is the problem. His turnovers are the problem. He's getting exceptionally unlucky with these turnovers. And so not only is he making less turnover-worthy plays, but he's having more turnovers occur against him. If that levels out, a lot of these back-breaking turnovers that are just killing the Bills' offense in games are going to go away. And so it's kind of, let's see how this levels out. But that is all a way to answer that. No, I don't look at this as a motivational boost with the offensive coordinator change. I don't think anything changes for the Bills offensively, and I don't think Dorsey was viewed as the problem by the guys who are expressing that there is a problem within the locker room. If McDermott was let go, I think we're looking at a much different story, but that's obviously not the case. But I think that is the main problem within the locker room as a whole. Long way of saying I think the Bills at 7 is right against this Jets defense. I think that this is a good price. And from the total perspective, I think that the total is right too. Boring answer, but kind of now gives the explanation of what's going on within the Bills offense, and something that you can look at again. And Murray says, the Jets burn me every week. Can't get there. Jets absolutely killed me last week against the Raiders. That was a painful one. Vikings on the road at the Broncos. Speaking of getting killed, Josh Dobbs again puts the knife in my back. I should say again. That was the first time that it really happened. Well, no, that's not true. It's the second time. Broncos 2.5-point favorites, total 43.5. Josh Dobbs is the next Michael Vick, apparently, at this rate. Nobody can get enough of Josh Dobbs at this point. There were some pros yesterday that took the number with the Vikings at 2.5. We saw that show up on the screen a little bit, got down to Denver minus 1.5. Now money has come back the other way. We're out to Broncos minus 2.5, so some disagreement within that. Justin Jefferson is obviously key for Minnesota within this. Yesterday, O'Connell had a press conference. And at the press conference, he said that Jefferson is ramping up. We're continuing to increase his workload. There was nothing definitive about him being back on the field for this week. And if we go back 2 or 3 weeks for how Jefferson was being spoken about being handled for this injury, all of the reporting was that the Vikings were going to take their time. They didn't expect it to be season ending. They wanted him to get back when he is 100% and only 100%. With how this has progressed, I would say that it's more likely than not that Justin Jefferson will not play on this game for the Minnesota Vikings. I think we will see KJ Osborne back, who cleared protocol allegedly before last week, but was held up due to precautionary reasons. I don't buy that, but I do think we'll see Osborne back. Here's kind of my thing with this is I think the Broncos defense is a very underrated unit. I think that they're a team that's going to continue to improve, as we said during the high-low segment. I think what we saw visually from the Broncos on Monday Night Football against the Bills shows that. I think that all stands out. When I'm looking at this game, I could only look at betting on the Broncos in this spot. What worries me a little bit is you got the Broncos win on Monday Night Football against the Bills. And I would have been just all over this if that field goal would have missed, it would have stood. Nobody would want any part of the Broncos in this spot. It would have been this huge Josh Dobbs story. We would have seen the number that was 1 - 15 for the Broncos on the look ahead and the initial immediate opener at Chris, we probably would have seen that as a pickup because it would have been this sell spot. Nobody wanted to touch the Broncos. They win at Buffalo, and now we're kind of seeing the market come back the other way. So that kind of lessens my hesitation. But for me, it's a Vikings offense, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but you're relying on these 3rd and 4th down scrambles. It's Dobbs getting out of the pocket. He's extending these plays, right? He looked really good against the Saints, who had just a no-show from a defensive game plan. Back-to-back weeks at home for Minnesota. He gets the job done. To me, it's exactly what happened in Arizona, right? We think about how that season started. He got to Arizona basically the week of week 1. He knew nothing. He took up the playbook. Weeks 1, 2, and 3, no, everybody loved Josh Dobbs. Nobody could get enough Josh Dobbs. It's like, he's great. Like, come on, let's get more Josh Dobbs, right? Falls off a cliff to the point where his OC says, you got to go, and basically gives him away for nothing, right? Comes into Minnesota, doesn't know the cadence, doesn't know anybody, comes in, wins week 1, wins week 2, Josh Dobbs, we need Josh Dobbs, right? And so that's now all like the standout story in the rage, and the Vikings are getting bet as such. Josh Dobbs cut me off the stream, apparently, with the powers that be behind the scenes cutting that off. But it's like, how can Josh Dobbs continue? Like, he's throwing to nobody. It's TJ Hawkinson playing with multiple injuries. It just, boy. And so I look at this, and maybe that was a sign not to pull the trigger on the Broncos. But hey, there we go. But I don't know how this can continue on for much longer. I think Josh Dobbs has been figured out. I think this Broncos defense is much better than it is being rated. And so that's how I would look at this game as it stands currently. Monday Night Football, it's the Eagles on the road at the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City, a 2.5-point favorite at home, -120. This has been back and forth between 2.5 and 3. I don't think that this is a number that is going to close on the 3 for Kansas City. Maybe if it does, it'll be around 3 even money. We've seen interest in the Eagles at 3 coming back the other way. We've seen intrigue from the Chiefs at 2.5 when it gets to -10, kind of locked in at that price point. The total has come down from 48.5 to 45.5. There was a release on the total under from a service, and in the write-up, it quoted the weather as being the driver for this game being bet under. As the forecast stands right now, forecast doesn't look that bad. We'll see how that trends the next 48 hours, but I don't know if I agree with that weather move to the under. I think that the potential that Hurts is not 100%. I think the Eagles offense without Goddard is more of an impact potentially than the weather. That could definitely change, but let's see with that. So that would be my one take on the total. I think the Chiefs are the side in this one. Certainly the side that I am most intrigued with as well. When you're looking at it at less than a field goal, I think it's just a spot where, again, you're getting Mahomes at less than a field goal at home off of the bye. I think that it gives the Chiefs a chance to sort of sort things out with their offense, with their wide receivers. Against Miami, play calling wise, the Chiefs looked a lot different, looked a lot more effective, a lot more creativity. And it kind of makes you wonder if the Chiefs are kind of waiting between sort of this optimal play calling and play design that they have for games when they really need to pull it out versus just kind of getting by and continuing to develop these guys and work things in and out in games where they're really comfortable and in control. But to me, in that Germany game, you watch the first quarter and it's like, there's what the Chiefs offense can look like when it's firing on all cylinders and you get the play calling and everything worked in. I think that urgency is going to be there again against the Eagles. And I think we're going to see that show out quite a bit as well. I think the Chiefs defense continues to be a unit that's just dominant. And so when you think about the Eagles defense specifically, very good against the run. Teams playing the Eagles have the highest pass rate over expectation of any opponent in the league. So teams just throw all over the Eagles. And that's really going to force this to be a Mahomes game. And anytime that you're getting that situation with it being the Mahomes game, with him being at home in this spot where there's going to be more likely more optimal play calling, you're getting that outlook. I think that that's a really good side to be on. It may sound basic. It may sound square. I may get chirped for it, but that's just kind of the short of it and how you look at it. I think Mahomes is going to throw a ton, is going to look really good against this Eagles defense. So that's how I'd look at that one. Short and simple. Would only look at the Chiefs in this one at less than a field goal. All right. That wraps up another week 11. We had a good comment here that I want to bring up as well from Murray. Come on. Only 60 likes from 190 people watching. That's right. Give it a thumbs up if you found anything valuable within this video. I know that some people did because some things that I talked about on the stream moved as the stream was going on a little bit. Specifically a total at Chris. So someone out there thought something was valuable enough that they went and bet it on their own. If you got something from this live stream, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe. It helps with the video. As always, leave the comments down below between now and Sunday. I have a lot of fun answering them. I really like the sort of look as a whole of how that thread goes. A lot of good questions. People find some value within that too. So if you liked what was going on in the video and in the next 4 days, you have more comments or questions, please down below in the comments, bring that up. Murray, I have no thoughts on the Grey Cup. I'm sorry. Mikey, survivor between Jacksonville and Houston and Lions. I don't know if you have to use Detroit for Thanksgiving. That might factor in. If so, I'd go Jags. If not, I would go Lions. Dale, we talked about DTR starting at the top of the show. Like Cleveland in that spot with DTR. Other than that, looks like the comments have showed up. Best in the business from Elite Deep. Thank you very much for that comment. Thanks, Gerard, for joining. Dank Hank in there as well. Lots of fun all the way around. Paul Enzo, time to hedge Houston division props. Absolutely not. Let him go. Let him run. And no, Max, I'm sorry, no RSM Classic picks from the group. Massive golfer. Love to play it. Love lessons. Love watching all the YouTube stuff. Watch all the tour events. Golf Channel's always on the TV. Just not a golf bettor myself. If someone knows how to, I just can't beat it. So that's not something that I have or something that I can give out. But I'll certainly be watching that. We'll be watching the LPGA Tour Championship as well. That's going to be a fun event this week. And then we have TGL starting in about a month's time as well. That's going to be fun to watch as well. So again, we'll wrap it up. Thanks everybody for stopping by. We'll be back with another show next Wednesday, 9:15 a.m. Pacific. And please go over raspicks.com/order. Check it out. Really encourage everybody to get involved with that starter service or the flagship if you are so inclined. Lots of college basketball coming out each and every day. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy week 11. We'll chat to you next Wednesday at 9:15 a.m. Pacific.